Spring practice is officially underway in Eugene, and I've already got some takeaways after hearing from head coach Dan Lanning and both coordinators. Five-star wide receiver Chris Henry Jr., he's leaving that door cracked open for the Ducks right now. Which recruits in the class of 2026 are must sign? There's one position group on the 25 Ducks that I believe is the deepest and could be the most dominant. This is an absolutely stacked edition of That Show Out West. Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West, an unbiased, neutral observer's view of Oregon Ducks football. I'm Ted LeBrew. The vibes are high here at TSOW. The vibes are high in Eugene, coming off a really good visit. Tyler Atkinson, a five-star linebacker from the state of Georgia. A lot of good things are being said following his visit. We've got some great information from our guys, Max Torres, recruiting expert, and Justin Hopkins over there at Scoop Duck on this Tyler Atkinson visit. I just became a member over there at Scoop Duck. So I'm posting on the message boards and seeing some great exclusive content that they got reporting over there. The Scoop is over at the Oregon On 3 affiliate over there at Scoop Duck. No question about it. So if you haven't gotten over there already, consider joining me. Although the first two spring practices were closed to the media, head coach Dan Lanning and offensive coordinator Will Stein, as well as defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi, had their first press conferences of the 2025 season. And I've certainly got some takeaways from what we heard from all three of these guys. And I think there's 4 bullet points. I think there's 4 good pieces of information that we already have about this 2025 Oregon Ducks football team. You know, spring practice is a time for the leaders on the team to really set themselves apart and for people to really look towards them, to really set the tone for the culture of what Oregon football is and what Oregon football is going to be in 2025, what is going to be the whys of this Oregon football team, what is going to be the motivations of this Oregon football team in 2025. And Will Stein's press conference, he really highlighted somebody that he thought was emerging as a leader on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, I mean, I love, Poncho's finding his voice. He was an underclassman last year, but now to me, he's the anchor for us up front, and he's going on. He didn't necessarily start as a freshman, but he played a lot. So to me, he's almost like a 3-year starter for us. He's definitely one of our leaders. We all know it takes time to develop leadership, and it starts with your actions. But, yeah, I believe we have the potential to have a lot of strong leaders on our team, and it's through this practice, through summer, through fall, and then through real games for them to really show. Yeah, I would say Poncho right now currently is doing a really good job up front and really establishing that culture for us.
These are all fantastic things to hear right now from Will Stein, because if you look at this offensive line, you've got 3 transfers coming in, all really expected to start. Emmanuel Preynon at guard, the 2 tackles, Isaiah World and Alex Harkey. And then if you look at the other guard, you're probably looking at someone like Matthew Bedford that's full go here to start spring practice. He was injured, of course, last year. He transferred in from Indiana. So there's one guy that's left. There's one guy that's returning that's played a lot, as Will said, the past 2 years, and that's Iapani Lalaolu. There's no doubt there needs to be a voice in this room to talk about the culture that has been established back-to-back years, the Oregon Ducks, have been a Joe Moore Award finalist. And it's awesome to hear that Pancho is making his voice heard. Like, Will Stein could talk about anybody on offense, and there is a lot of youth and inexperience and new guys coming in on the offensive side of the football. So it's great to see someone that's been a big part of Oregon football, certainly last year. And then he was a 24/7 Sports true freshman All-American his first year as well. I think that this is a huge year for Iapani Lalaolu to really step up and be maybe somewhere like Jackson Powers Johnson was in 2023 as one of the best centers in college football. He's the captain of the offensive line, and I think guys in that room, especially the new guys and the new transfers, are certainly going to be looking to him for leadership. Now, when you talk about Oregon football, specifically for the 2025 season, there's a lot of inexperience right now, and there's a lot of battles that are really kicking off within spring practice right now. And I think there's segments of the fan base right now that are maybe going at it a little bit because Oregon has been able to attract great players and bring in great players via the transfer portal. They've been able to attract and bring in great players in high school recruiting as well. And I think there's some people that really want to see those great recruits that they've brought in the last couple of years really step up into the fold. But there's also transfers that I think you need to certainly plug holes with. And we know guys in the transfer portal really have a quicker and faster option to getting up to that starting level that they expect right now from the Oregon Ducks. But as Dan Lanning said, it doesn't matter if you've been around 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It doesn't matter if you're a true freshman or a sixth-year senior. If you're good enough, you're old enough.
We always say if you're good enough, you're old enough, right? And we had some young guys that can contribute last year, but maybe weren't ready for the biggest roles. And I think you'll see some of those guys step up and have bigger roles for our team this year. Again, wherever you fall in the pecking order, it doesn't matter. It matters, are you playing above-the-line football? And if we have a lot of guys that can play above-the-line football, you'll see a lot of guys on the field for us.
Spring football is all about making that first impression. I love to hear this right off the bat. First press conference from the leader of the Oregon free world right now in Dan Lanning. The best players will play. Doesn't matter if you're a true freshman. Doesn't matter who you are on this team. This is going to breed all sorts of competition really starting off in spring football. And I think it's because of this, because of these great freshmen that are coming in, because of these great guys that have been in the program for 1 year, maybe been in the program for 2 years, maybe been in the program for 3 years, maybe even been in the program pre-Dan Lanning, and these transfers coming in. You have this melting pot of all of these really good to great players. And they're going to go head-to-head in spring ball. These battles are going to turn into wars, as I've said on the show before, as we turn into fall camp. The competition will breed the very best version of Oregon football. This is why you recruit great players. This is why you bring in the best of the best in the transfer portal. So we can get the best, very best players on the field at Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon. Now, there may be no room, there may be no position group that really personifies the Oregon experience, or dare I say, Oregon inexperience, more than the defense and more than the secondary room right now. But this is a little bit of another collision where you have the inexperience, but you look at some of these names and the stars behind them and the potentials they have. And now that they have the measurables that Oregon is looking for, specifically in the secondary, although there is some inexperience, and they certainly got to deal with that, there's some excitement about what's certainly coming in here in spring practice for Oregon. Take a look. Here's what Tosh Lupoi had to say about it.
You got a total lack of Oregon experience, so whether that's youth or individuals from other places that haven't had the Oregon experience. The most exciting part is our evaluation in these guys and our development that's led to this point now. So we've got to get these guys from a schematic standpoint, fundamentals and technique standpoint, to match the intensity of those three guys you just mentioned that's played a lot of reps here. Dante Manning, Tysheem Johnson, Nico Reed, that was returning from the 23 season last, right? Now what these guys, walk down the tunnel with is something different when it comes to length, speed, and the potential of what these guys come. So that's the big challenge: is can we tap in and maximize the potential that these guys have to offer? And that's really exciting. When it comes to coaching, you love that opportunity when there's a multitude of athletes here now that are really fitting those measurement specs, that we've worked really hard bringing here.
I think that soundbite right there from defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi is a perfect personification, not just of the players that he's coaching on defense, but really this Oregon football team as a whole. Maybe they lack the Oregon experience, being within the system, learning the scheme. For some of the transfers, got to get them up to speed, especially if they want them to start here in 2025 in week 1 when they kick off against the Montana State Bobcats. But there's also some excitement of some of these players that they've been able to bring in and the potential and getting them up to speed and developing them so they can be high-level, elite-level football players and achieve that higher ceiling that you get out of an elite high school player as opposed to a transfer. Now, I got one more thing that really stood out to me. There's been things that I've been talking about ad nauseum on this show, and one of them is tight end Kenyon Sadiq, but you don't got to hear it from me anymore. Here's offensive coordinator Will Stein raving and getting my excitement level even higher for 18 this season.
Kenyon Sadiq's one of the best players in the country. I'm glad we have him back. It's my job to make sure he's getting as many touches as we can every single game. He's put on, 15 pounds of muscle. He's nearing 250 and still looks the same speed, has great hands. I think he's a better point of attack on the ball tight end than people might believe just because he's so dang strong. And now he's got a great understanding of what we're doing offensively. So I think now he's really in the limelight. He is the upperclassman in that room. He's kind of the old head. Another guy, talk about leadership. Kenyon's somebody that I'm expecting to be one of those leaders on our team. He provides so much value in the pass game, in the run game, RPOs. He's a very special player. I mean, I really do believe he's one of the best players in college football. So it's my job, it's our job to make sure he shows that ability this season.
What more needs to be said, man? Sitting somewhere around 250 pounds, putting on 15 pounds of muscle, maintaining around that 4.6 speed at the tight end position. And what I think I love the most is Will Stein saying, we got to get this guy the football. He's one of the best players in college football. I've talked about it ad nauseum. Him and Evan Stewart really and Jacorian Moore are going to be the main targets, I think, from day one. And I'm excited to see what Will Stein can dial up in terms of creativity to get the ball to Kenyon Sadiq as much as they possibly can. Man, that jacks me up. That revs me up. All of this stuff is getting me excited and ready to go, no doubt. You know what time it is, folks. Get in your stagecoaches. Get in your covered wagons. It's time to go down the Oregon recruiting trail. College football recruiting, Oregon Ducks recruiting is very much a puzzle. There's a lot of pieces sitting on the table, and a lot of times those pieces are moving in different directions. Sometimes they're moving towards you, and the puzzle becomes very clear, but then other times, sometimes one piece maybe gets taken out of the shuffle, and all of a sudden, now you don't have a clear picture anymore. There's a lot of moving puzzle pieces, I think, in the wide receiver room right now for the class of 2026. The first thing that I want to begin with is some pretty recent news considering 2 4-star wide receivers right now. There's an on-3 RPM prediction for 4-star wide receiver Jalen Lott out of the state of Texas, and then Modern Day's Caden Dixon Wyatt flat out says, Oregon is in the lead for my recruitment, certainly right now. When you talk about Dixon Wyatt, it's that modern day connection. We're going to be talking a lot about modern day as this show certainly concludes right now. But you look at him, he's 118th overall, number 17 in the wide receiver rankings right now. Jalen Lott is really that connection to Texas that was certainly laid down by Rashad Samples with the recruitment and flip of Decorian Moore. And Jalen Lott is a really, really good player. He's the number 67 overall player in the country, the number 10 wide receiver right now. Like, if I'm this Oregon coaching staff, and there's a lot of priorities, certainly, and we're going to lay them out here for you on this very show. There's a lot of priorities, but I would love to get these two 4-star, solid to really good talents in this 26 class locked up, and then maybe shift my wide receiver resources elsewhere. Let's talk about elsewhere right now. Elsewhere is in Santa Ana, California. Elsewhere is at Mater Dei High School in the form of 5-star wide receiver, current Ohio State commitment in Chris Henry Jr. He was on campus this past weekend. He was on campus earlier for Oregon's Junior Day about a month and a half, 2 months ago, something like that. It's funny because he says as long as Brian Hartline is the wide receivers coach, is the offensive coordinator over at Ohio State, I'm going to be locked into the Buckeyes. For being a guy that's locked into Ohio State and that has made those types of comments before, the door just remains cracked open, and he keeps on finding his way out west over to Eugene, Oregon. All Dan and this staff needs is the crack in the door that's open, and they're going to bring the axe to the door, pound it through the door, and say, "Here's Danny." Like, that's what this staff has proven with some elite level prospects in the past. If you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. Look at the recruitment of Naeem Offord. He was committed to Ohio State. It really came down, I believe it was Oregon and Auburn last signing day, and Oregon came in there. He put on the O cap, and a lot of people were kind of surprised by that move. Dan Lanning is the ultimate quiet closer when it comes to recruiting. All this staff needs is to continue to get a guy like Chris Henry Jr. on campus. Keep him interested. The longer that this recruitment stays with this steam, where there's steam, there's smoke, where there's smoke, there's fire. As long as those things remain present and Oregon keeps on getting him on the West Coast, this recruitment is not going to be over until signing day in December, certainly right now. And I'll say this, and we're going to be talking about quarterbacks here in just a little bit. Getting a commitment from a high-quality 5-star quarterback like, Jared Curtis is also going to really help this as well. I still maintain the fact that Chris Henry Jr. he's probably a long shot to flip to the Ducks, but what a huge flip that would be if they are indeed able to pull this off. The door has not been shut. Certainly, like Kendra Harrison on the Ducks, he has shut the door. Tredarian Ball has all but shut the door on his recruitment. The door remains open, and the longer that door remains open, the longer distance it is from Ohio State winning the national championship, from New Year's Day, and we all certainly know what happened there. I'm convinced that the longer this thing goes on, the better chance that Dan Lanning and this Ducks staff are certainly going to have as this thing goes along. But that's a little bit of a moving piece right now, and I think that's maybe where a lot of the resources at the wide receiver position are going for this Oregon staff in this 2026 class right now. But here's one thing to keep in mind. If Chris Henry Jr. does not flip over to Oregon, and like I said, I think it's a long shot. If I were to predict now, I'd probably say that is not going to happen. One thing I think people forget when they talk about the class of 2026 is there is a kid committed what was that, last year, 2 years ago, during the February signing period in Gatlin Bear. That was a 5-star wide receiver, top 30 player in the country. That is that elite level of player, and he's going to be coming in as a freshman next year in the 26 class. Like, if your worst case scenario is Gatlin Bear followed by 2 4-star wide receivers that are both top 150 guys, you're sitting in a really, really good spot right now. And then you look at what happened last year. They signed DeCorian Moore, and then they signed Cooper Perry as well. So that's 5 blue chip wide receivers, maybe 6 if they somehow fit Chris Henry Jr. in there. That's 5 blue chip wide receivers in the last 2 years. That's a really good receiving haul in a 2-year period there from the Oregon Ducks. Either way, certainly like the way this thing is headed, and the puzzle continues to be put together, certainly for the Ducks, as it pertains to the recruitment of the wide receiver room. I think there's some flexibility with Gatlin Bear coming off of his Mormon mission, being a freshman in this class of 2026, for what the Ducks might do, maybe what the Ducks will do at the wide receiver position going forward. But there might not be as much flexibility with some other players in this 26 class. I think that there are some must-sign players in this 26 group for the Oregon Ducks right now. And it's not necessarily a future roster considerations or depth at any certain position. It's more in principle and how it could maybe affect Oregon recruiting at certain positions and in certain areas of the country moving forward. I want to first start at Mater Dei. It is the #1 high school football program in the United States of America, and it has become a really good pipeline of talent in Southern California for the Oregon Ducks, certainly in these past few seasons. Tomahini Tupoi and Cody Green, in my humble opinion, leave your humble opinions in the comments below. In my humble opinion, these guys are must-sign players. Let's start first with Tom, defending Trinity League MVP. What did we just talk about on the last edition of TSOW? Bot Mulatalo, switching from defensive line to only wants to play offensive line at the college level, thus decommitting from Oregon. Those two parties certainly didn't match up on the change in position for Bot. Like, this was, it still is, as it currently stands, but this was a haul of what they had from the defensive line in the class of 2026. Tony Tuioti was and still is doing a great job at bringing in elite level defensive line talent to the University of Oregon right now. But after losing Bot, and if they do, because there's been a lot of smoke in regards to Tomahini Tupoi, he recently visited USC. There's been a lot of smoke of him possibly flipping to the Trojans. If they do lose him, and now all of a sudden that defensive line haul goes from 4 down to 2, you've got Vialami Maloa, you've got Tony Cumberland, Tony Cumberland is a guy that is locked in, by the way, to the Oregon Ducks right now. But if you lose Tom over to USC, I think that's a big dent in maybe Oregon holding on to that elite school down in Southern California. Because as it pertains to both of these guys and the Mater Dei connection, I think Oregon, these two specific guys, if they can get these guys to sign on the dotted line, all of the momentum that USC has right now, all of the smoke and Chad Bowden coming in as the general manager and all the good things that they're doing right now as the #1 class in the country. If Oregon can get these two Mater Dei players to sign on the dotted line, that puts a stop sign. That, I think, puts a halt to the momentum that USC is building right now in Southern California, because I think that there's been this narrative going around that, All right, they got this great new general manager in there, and they're finally really putting their effort and resources into Southern California. It's like the Pete Carroll days, people are saying. They're drawing 60 to 70 mile radius of Southern California, and they're saying, this is our territory. Once again, Oregon, get out. This is entitled to us. But if Oregon can hold on to an elite level offensive lineman, an elite level defensive lineman at the elite school in Southern California, that's Oregon saying, this has been our territory. Not sure where you've been the last 5 or 10 years or whatever it's been, but we've been doing pretty well here in Southern California. And this has been a pipeline of ours. And you all of a sudden think that Oregon is just going to be kicked out of Southern California? That's Oregon saying it's going to take a lot more than a new general manager to get our presence out of Southern California, where a lot of elite level football talent, like there could be as much as 4 modern day commitments, signees in this Oregon Ducks recruiting class. Like that pipeline is certainly alive and well. And that's kind of why I believe these two guys, specifically with the modern day connection, is very, very important, especially in their West Coast battle with the USC Trojans right now. So got to hold on to Tomohini Tupoi on the defensive line. And then when you look at Cody Green was one of the highest risers in the last on 300 rankings. I think he's like is he a top 10 overall prospect right now? He's certainly a top 20 overall prospect is right now. So they, I think, are setting a standard in this 26 class of what they want from an offensive lineman, of what they want from an offensive tackle. Because there's been a little bit of smoke. I don't think there's as much smoke for Cody Green to flip somewhere else than there is Tomohini Tupoi, certainly right now. So you got to hold on to him, because I think Dan and this Oregon staff really wants to take home 2 elite level offensive tackles in this class, in this cycle. Cody Green, and then one of Jackson Cantwell and Emmanuel Iheanacho. Now, Oregon is very much in the mix for those elite level players, top 5 overall players in this class right now, but nothing is certainly guaranteed with Jackson Cantwell and Emmanuel Iheanacho. If Cody Green does flip elsewhere, all of a sudden you could go from possibly 2 elite level offensive tackles down to none. Maybe does it open up a spot if Cody Green decommits? Maybe does that create something a little bit more favorable with those guys? Maybe yes, maybe no. I maybe lean a little bit towards no. I think this Oregon staff really wants to take advantage of the talent level that there is at the offensive tackle spot in this class. You see kind of positions really fluctuate from year to year, but there might be no better class in recent memory at the offensive tackle position in terms of overall players and where they stack up at the tackle position than this class in 2026. If Dan can take home 2 of those elite level guys, those are going to be possibly 2 future NFL tackles protecting your quarterbacks in the near future. Hey, let's talk about quarterbacks, and I think that there is an either-or scenario must sign. Jared Curtis or Ryder Lyons. I've talked about Jared Curtis ad nauseum on this show. He just came off visits to Oregon and Georgia, respectively. If, for example, Jared Curtis goes to Georgia, Ryder Lyons goes like USC, maybe an upset with someone like a BYU or a Michigan who's in the race for him right now, they will have lost out on 4 high-level quarterbacks in the last 2 cycles. Let's remember, Jaron Kavawe Sagapulitele coming out of Hawaii, broke all of those Dylan Gabriel and Marcus Mariota state passing records over there. We know he came in and then he decommitted and went to Cal, and then Jonas Williams. Like, that's the big one right here. Jonas Williams, a really good quarterback, high 4-star level player out of the state of Illinois. We all know why he decommitted from Oregon and then committed to USC, because the Ducks were pushing their resources into the middle of the table of these 2 guys that you see on your screen. For those of you on podcast, of course, Jared Curtis, and really the 2027 guy in Ryder Lyons, because he's going to take a 1-year mission. If it happens where they don't get either of these guys and they push their resources off of Jonas Williams elsewhere, that's not a good look, I think, for the future recruitment of high-level high school quarterbacks in the future. Yes, I know they got a 4-star and Achilles Smith Jr. I think he's going to require a little bit of development. We'll see what happens, certainly from his perspective. But I think considering what happened with Jonas Williams and the narrative and the truth we know that surrounded that flip, one of these guys is imperative for Oregon in the future. Now, I know that they can go out, and they've shown the ability to go out and get transfer quarterbacks. Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel were both Heisman Trophy finalists, but I think we want to get into a spot as much as we can where you can have elite level high school talent coming in at the biggest and most important positions, and there is no position more important than quarterback. There's a lot of really good position groups on this Oregon football team for the 2025 season, but I'm here to pick one that I think is the deepest, that I think is the best, and maybe the one that I'm most excited to see hit the field in 2025, and it is the defensive line and edge room. I am so pumped. I am so excited to see what this room can do in 2025. You look back to 2024, and you certainly saw the progressions. You saw what Derek Harmon can do in a one-year transfer situation, someone like a Jamari Caldwell as well. You saw Mateo Uyunglele. You saw Jordan Birch. You saw all of these guys and what they can really do, but I personally think that was just scratching the surface. I look up all and down the guys on the roster that are defensive tackles, defensive end, or edge rushers, and I see a lot of names that could play football this season. I see a lot of names that could play impactful snaps for the Oregon Ducks. And when I look at the defensive line and the edge room, from now on, I'll just call it the defensive line. You guys understand certainly where I'm going with that, including the edges in this room as well. I look at it, there's a combination of experience, guys that have played in Big Ten scenarios, guys that have played in Pac-12 scenarios, guys that have played in Power 2 football scenarios and have experience playing at a high level. You have highly recruited young talent that has learned, been in this system, been in this scheme for at least one season. And then you have incoming young freshman players that provide a lot of potential and a lot of chances for them to learn and look at the guys ahead of them, how they practice and how they play, and set the stage for their futures, certainly in Eugene. When I start with the experience, I don't know. How about the guy that was one of the top pass rushers in the Big Ten last year as it pertains to sacks? Mateo Uyunglele coming off of one side. He's likely going to take that Jordan Birch spot at the defensive end spot. And then you have the jack outside linebacker, Tatum Tuiota. He lines up on the line of scrimmage certainly a lot. You've got two returning players coming off the edge on both sides that combined for 16 sacks and 21 tackles for a loss last season. I think you're going to have one of the best pass rush combinations now in the Big Ten Conference and maybe in college football. Well, maybe that's going maybe a little bit too far, but I think it's going to be a really good pass rush experienced group with two guys that have been cornerstones of Oregon recruiting classes, certainly over the past 2 years as well. You look to the inside of that defensive line. Amari Washington played in all 14 games last season. He was highly involved in that rotation, and you don't have to ask me. Go look at some other shows, some other podcasts, and look what they're saying about Amari Washington. Look what some experts are saying about Amari Washington right now, and that he could really evolve and step up to the plate as an all-conference player, like right off the bat. If you want to include that jack linebacker as the fourth guy in the defensive line, 3 out of the 4 spots are very solidified with experienced players that have been in the rotation and that are expected to play at a high level and an all-conference type of level in 2025. When I look at the defensive tackle spot beyond Amari Washington, why I believe that this is going to be the best position group for the Oregon Ducks this season, and maybe be one of the Big Ten's best defensive lines, It's because this defensive line is going to start looking like a Big Ten defensive line. It's looking like a Power 2 defensive line. Like when Dan Lanning took over, he was coming from a place like Georgia that he knows what a nasty Power 2 championship level defensive line is supposed to look like. And the reason why I love this room so much is because of the measurables of some of these guys on the D-line. Amari Washington, aforementioned, how about 6'3", 320 in the middle, and he can certainly move as well. But you look at someone like a Terrence Green and Tion Gray, like those are two guys that outside of Amari Washington are two guys that are going to be in the conversation to either start or be highly involved in the rotation. Green, 6'5", 330 pounds. Gray, 6'6", also 330 pounds. It doesn't get much bigger and badder, certainly, than that. Aiden Breland at 6'5", 295 pounds, but he can move. You can put him on different spots, I think, in different situations on the defensive line. Oh, and then you got Bear Alexander, a 5-star talent. We know what he can certainly do. There's been a lot of great returns and a lot of great things in terms of the work ethic by both Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi when they've talked about Bear Alexander so far. And that's been something that I've really wanted to hear about Bear. What is he doing? How late is he staying in the building? And he's staying as late as anybody, according to the coaching staff right now. 6'3", 315 pounds, and then you got the biggest of them all, Jericho Johnson at 6'4", 340 pounds. Like, you go through all of the guys on that list right now. Like, I think, and I've talked about this before, probably the best case scenario, not the only scenario that can turn out really well for the Ducks next season, but the best case scenario that might provide the highest ceiling is Mateo and Tatum, certainly coming off the edge, Amari Washington and Bear Alexander. Like, even if Bear is just a capable Big Ten starting defensive tackle, you have Green, Gray, Breland. Those are depth guys that a lot of people are expecting big things from next season. What I've learned watching Big Ten football over the years, specifically the last 2 seasons at Michigan and Ohio State, if you've got great defensive line play and you've got a lot of depth and depth of talent on the defensive line, you are going to be a championship level football team. Go back to like when Clemson won national championships and how good their defensive line was. Alabama. Defensive line is a huge part. If you can have an elite level group at this position and have great depth, you are going to be in the conversation for the college football playoff and thus the national championship as well. I mentioned those first 2 edge guys, but there's some really good edge depth as well. A lot of people are purchasing Blake right now. Blake Purchase got on the field a lot 2 years ago. Last year, maybe not as much, but you know, when defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi talks about him, he talks about his NFL future. And then Elijah Rushing was a 5-star coming out of high school as well. There's a lot of expectations for him. Like, all of these guys were blue chip players, 4-star guys, 5-star guys. This staff has done a phenomenal job at recruiting a different kind, a bigger and badder and nastier kind of defensive linemen than we've really seen at the University of Oregon right now. And then when you look at the future, now it's really only comes down to the edge, not as much as the defensive tackle in this last recruiting class, but Toby Hastrup and Matthew Johnson really provide that excitement and those development opportunities for the future. Specifically, Toby Hastrup comes from London. He played 1 year of high school football, yet he's being recruited by Michigan and Oregon, obviously, because that's where he ended up here at the Ducks. And he's getting recruited by blue chip, blue blood type of programs right now. So, and he has, I think it was Marshall Melcho that talked about it on the signing day show. He's got elite level measurables for an edge rusher, certainly in the future. I think this defensive line room has it all, from the experience, starting and getting good snaps in production to the Power 2 level, to guys that have been in this room and under this coaching for a year or more, and exciting prospects for the future. I love the depth. I love the potential dominance of this defensive line for the Ducks in 2025. What a stacked edition of TSOW here today. I want to thank everybody out there for joining me in this edition of That Show Out West. We've got all kinds of great shows coming up here in the future, maybe with some potential fantastic guests as well. We've had some really good guests so far in the brief history of guests here on TSOW. So until next time, I'm Ted LaBrue. This has been That Show Out West.